Imagine you're pinned down. Bullets are tearing through the air 2 inches above your helmet. Your squad is frozen. Your radio is dead. Your commanding officer is screaming something you can't make out over the noise. This is Sicily, July 1943, one of the bloodiest invasion campaigns of World War II. American soldiers are being mowed down by an enemy machine gun nest that nobody can get close to. Every man who tries ends up eating dirt. Command has no answer. The situation looks desperate. And then, without warning, a blur of fur and fury explodes past the front line. No orders. No hesitation. What happens next is something those soldiers would tell their grandchildren for the rest of their lives. His name was Chips. He was a mixed-breed shepherd, husky, and collie, a regular dog from a regular American family in Pleasantville, New York. His owner had donated him to the U.S. Army's War Dog program, known as the Canine Corps at the start of the war. He wasn't the biggest dog in the unit. He wasn't the most decorated, not yet. He was assigned as a sentry dog to the 3rd Infantry Division. And on this particular morning in Sicily, his handler couldn't hold him back. Operation Husky had been underway for hours. Allied forces had stormed the beaches of Sicily, but the advance inland was a nightmare. Axis machine gun crews were dug into defensive pillboxes, thick concrete structures designed to absorb punishment and cut down anything that moved in the open. For soldiers on the ground, approaching a pillbox without cover was essentially a death sentence. Veterans said you could almost hear those machine guns laughing at them. Something had to give. And something did, just not the thing anyone expected. Bell Channel CTA number 1, mid-setup before the action drops. Before we get into what Chips actually did, make sure you hit subscribe. We drop new stories about real animal war heroes every single week. You do not want to miss what's coming next. Chips snapped. That's the only word for it. His handler, Private John Rowell, felt the leash jerk violently, and then it was gone. Chips was running. Full sprint. Straight toward the machine gun nest that had been tearing apart the Allied advance. Every soldier who saw it thought the same thing. That dog is dead. But Chips didn't slow down. He hit the opening of the pillbox like a missile. Eyewitnesses reported hearing screaming, then silence. Moments later, one Italian soldier staggered out, bleeding, hands in the air. Then another. Then 2 more. All 4 soldiers surrendered on the spot. When the Americans reached the pillbox, they found Chips, wounded, singed from the gun's muzzle flash, but standing over the enemy gunners with fire in his eyes. Here's what made this moment unforgettable: it wasn't part of the plan. War dogs in the K9 Corps were trained for patrol, sentry work, and detection. They were not trained for direct assault. What Chips did that morning in Sicily was completely spontaneous. It was pure instinct, pure loyalty. And it worked. The Italian machine gun crew, hardened soldiers who had been confidently pinning down an entire Allied unit, surrendered to a dog. A single dog acting alone. Chips had a scalp wound and burns from the gun barrel, injuries that should have been enough to knock any creature out of the fight. But he kept going. Later that same day, Chips helped his unit locate and capture another group of 10 Italian soldiers hiding nearby. He wasn't done. He was never done. That is the kind of animal Chips was. But here is where the story gets complicated, and honestly, a little uncomfortable. Because of what Chips did, the U.S. Army awarded him the Silver Star for gallantry and the Purple Heart for his wounds. These are serious military honors. The same decorations given to human soldiers who perform acts of extraordinary courage under fire. The Army did this because what Chips had done genuinely met the standard. There was no question about his bravery. But then, somebody pushed back. An organization called the Sergeant Reckless Foundation, along with several veterans groups, raised formal objections. Their argument? These medals were designed for people. Giving them to a dog cheapened the honor. Reduced the meaning of a distinction that men and women had died to earn. The Army listened. The medals were officially revoked. And the debate that followed was fierce. Some soldiers who had been there, who had watched Chips charge into that pillbox, were furious. They said, "This dog saved lives. This dog showed more courage than half the humans on that battlefield. If that doesn't earn a medal, then what does?" Others said, "The rules exist for a reason. Symbols matter. Traditions matter. If you start handing out human military honors to animals, where does it end?" There was no easy answer. And here's the part that really stings: Chips never knew any of it. He didn't know he had earned honors. He didn't know they were taken away. He just kept serving. Bell Channel CD number 2, mid-script after moral tension lands. If this story is hitting different for you right now, good. That means you're paying attention. Drop a comment below. Should Chips have kept those medals? I read every single one. And while you're here, subscribe. More stories like this one are on the way. The controversy around chips didn't stay inside the military. It spilled into the press, into Congress, and into the living rooms of ordinary Americans who were following the war news. And it raised a question that nobody had really been forced to answer before. What do we owe the animals that fight alongside us? Because here's the truth that most people in 1943, and honestly most people today, don't want to sit with. War dogs were not volunteers. Chips didn't raise his paw and sign up. He was donated by his family, trained by strangers, put in a harness, and shipped to the other side of the world to serve in a conflict he had zero understanding of. He couldn't consent. He couldn't object. He couldn't ask for reassignment or file a complaint with command. He just did what the humans around him asked, and then he did more than that. He improvised. He acted on instinct to protect the people he had bonded with. And the reward for that was a medal that was then taken away because of a debate he would never know existed. Meanwhile, his handler Private Rowell spent years after the war speaking publicly about Chips. Not as a curiosity. Not as a mascot story. As a comrade. Rowell said that Chips had saved his life and the lives of everyone in that advance unit that day. He said the dog had more guts than most men he'd served with, and he meant it without irony. By the time Chips returned to the United States after the war, he was a celebrity. He met President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill during the war. Eisenhower personally tried to pet him, and Chips bit him. Gently but still. Even in the presence of the Supreme Allied Commander, Chips answered to nobody. That detail, for whatever reason, is the one that makes veterans laugh every single time. When the war ended, the U.S. military faced a decision it hadn't fully prepared for. What to do with the dogs. Thousands of Canine Corps animals had served overseas. Many of them had seen combat, lived in jungles, experienced artillery fire, and formed the kind of bonds with their handlers that only emerge in life-or-death situations. The military's initial plan was to simply keep them in service or reassign them. But public pressure, especially from the families who had donated dogs like Chips, pushed for something different. Chips was returned to his original family in Pleasantville, New York. That might sound like a happy ending. And in some ways it was. He came home. But the dog who came back was not quite the same dog who had left. He was quieter. More reactive. The war had left its mark on him in ways that a warm house and a backyard couldn't fully undo. He died in 1946, less than a year after returning home. He was just 5 years old. The Army's veterinary records listed the cause as nothing remarkable. But the men who served with him would have told you differently. He had given everything he had. The story of Chips didn't just end with his death. It changed things. The debate over his medals helped spark a broader conversation inside the U.S. military about how working dogs were classified, trained, and, critically, what happened to them after service. For decades, retired military dogs were officially categorized as equipment. Surplus equipment. They could be abandoned at overseas bases, left behind during withdrawals, or euthanized when they were no longer useful. The public outcry when this became widely known, fueled in part by stories like Chips, eventually led to real legislative change. In 2000, President Bill Clinton signed Robbie's Law, which officially allowed military working dogs to be adopted by their handlers or law enforcement agencies after retirement. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And it started, at least in part, because a dog in Sicily refused to wait for orders. Bell Channel CD number 3, just before the final reflection. We're almost at the end, but before I wrap this up, I want to ask you something. If you've made it this far, you clearly care about stories that actually matter. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications. Because the next story we're covering might be even harder to believe than this one. Today, the U.S. military employs roughly 1,600 active duty working dogs at any given time. They serve in every branch of the armed forces. They detect explosives. They track insurgents. They protect forward operating bases in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. And when they retire, the law says they deserve a home, not a disposal. That shift in thinking didn't happen overnight. It happened because of stories like Chips. Because individual soldiers came home and told the truth about what they had witnessed. That these animals weren't tools. They were teammates. They had personalities. They had courage. They had something that, in a firefight, looks a whole lot like loyalty, unconditional and absolute. The K9 program that Chips helped legitimize with his actions in Sicily is now considered one of the most effective force multipliers in modern military operations. Every dog currently serving owes something in a very real way to what that Shepherd Husky Collie mix did on a beach in 1943. We spend a lot of time debating what makes a hero. Is it training? Is it rank? Is it following orders? Or knowing when to break them? Chips never got a medal that stayed. He never got a ceremony that lasted. He got a few months back home in Pleasantville and then he was gone. But the 4 soldiers he forced to surrender? They lived. The men in his advance unit? They lived. Private Raoul? He lived and told the story for decades. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe heroism isn't about the medal. Maybe it's about the moment, the split second when something inside you says go, and you go. Chips went. That's enough. If Chips earned your respect today, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. And drop a comment telling me, which case do you think changed the course of a battle? I'll pin the best ones.